Hare Krishna. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvisesha Srinivadi Paschachari Satarane. This is Ekadasi, and in America it's Independence Day, 4th of July, and independence means really to be dependent on Krishna. The most independent person we know of is Narada Muni, who can go anywhere instantly and be welcomed anywhere. No one tells him what to do. That is complete independence, because he's totally dependent on Krishna. Anyway, I've been reading 11th canto, and I just happened to come to the Avanti Brahmana, and it's one of my favorite parts. I'm just going to read it. And this book has commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and purport by Bhaktivedanta Thakur. Starting with the text number 41 in the chapter. Even though low-class men ridiculed him in various ways in the hopes of making him fall down from his position, because he had a vow of silence, he remained steadfast in his determination, keeping himself fixed in the mode of goodness. Commentary. Those who were the lowest of mankind tried their best to deviate the Avanti Brahman from his determination to remain fixed in Krishna consciousness. All such attempts had no effect. However, because he remained firmly fixed in his resolve, while singing the song that is recorded in the following verse. O son of Prita, the determination which is unbreakable, which is sustained with steadfastness in yoga practice, and which controls the activities of the mind, life, and senses, is determination in the mode of goodness. Purport. Those who are envious of the Lord's devotees are certainly the lowest of men and are described as to traverse the path to hell in the near future. Indeed, atheists take pleasure in disturbing the devotees, either by jeering at them or by becoming, in spite of all these torments, however, the devotees remain tolerant, being determined to stay fixed in the mode of goodness, as advised by the Lord, as described by Srila Rupa Goswami. A sober person can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, and the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals. Is qualified to make disciples all over the world. Jipa Vegam, Udavapasta Vegam, Avyancha Vegam, Manasakroda Vegam, Jiva Vegam, Udavapasta Vegam, Etan Vegam, Yovisaheta Dira, Sarvam Apimam Prativim Shashishyat. So then this goes on. The Brahmana said, these people are not the cause of my happiness and distress. Neither are the demigods, my own body, the position of the planets, my karma or time. Rather, it is the mind alone that causes happiness and distress and perpetuates one's bondage in the vicious cycle of repeated birth and death. Commentary by Vishwanath. After careful deliberation, the Avanti Brahman realized that it was not actually the miscreants who were the cause of his distress. Did he think that maybe they were harassing him under the instigation of someone else? The answer is given in this verse. Neither the demigods, the body, nor the planets are creating my distress. It is the mind that is the actual cause of one's happiness and distress. It is stated in the Vedas that it is the mind that sees, hears, and makes one move here and there. Purport by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Those who are adverse to the service of the Supreme Lord must live within the cycle of repeated birth and death. Ishvara sarva bhutanam, Hridesha Arjuna tishtati, Brahmayan sarva bhutani, Yantra rudrani mayaya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. Bhagavad Gita 1861. According to the purport of this verse from the Bhagavad Gita, mental speculators must wander about in the cycle of birth and death, driven by the mind under the direction of the Supreme Lord. The wheel of time causes the living entity, who is a knower of the field of activities, to experience the changing nature of the material existence. The Avanti Brahman understood his mind alone to be the cause of all inauspiciousness, despite the fact that miscreants, the demigods, planets, one's karma, and time are no doubt apparent causes. In this regard, one can carefully consider this verse. For most people, the mind and heart are one, but because my mind never separated from Vrindavan, I consider my mind and Vrindavan to be one. My mind is already Vrindavan, and since you like Vrindavan, will you please place your lotus feet there? I would deem your full mercy. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya-lila 13:137. Powerful mind manifests the functions of the modes of nature, from which evolve the activities of the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. From the interaction of the modes of nature, various species of life evolve. Commentary. The mind is habituated to hankering after beautiful women and wealth. Even if one understands the fault of engaging in earning money for sense gratification, the mind will stubbornly insist that without wealth, even religious rituals cannot be properly performed. After all, it takes money to procure flower garlands, ghee, and sandalwood paste. In this way, the mind drives one on and on to the feverish search for money. The combination of the three modes of material nature awards one a material body whereby one sometimes identifies himself as being in a high status of life, sometimes in a low status, and sometimes somewhere in between. These conceptions are material designations gathered from the modes of nature, and they arrange themselves according to the tendency of the powerful mind to enjoy temporary sense gratification. Purport by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Now this interesting, we've seen many devotees get completely bewildered thinking that if I had so much money then I could do very big preaching and forget to preach in any service and get totally absorbed in making money, thinking that in the future they'll be able to use it for serving Krishna. So it's warned that that's not. Prabhupada told us in his life that he was thinking like that. Now we know Prabhupada, when we think back, we know it's completely Leela. He said, I saw my godbrothers, they were begging sannyasis, and I thought, I will earn money, and then I'll be able to preach. But then he said Krishna took away everything. Then he started preaching without any money, without thinking about money, and he ended up having unlimited money and followers. Purport. The materially absorbed mind of the conditioned soul who are averse to the Lord, Krishna's devotional service, is under the influence of the material qualities. When the conditioned soul is engaged in the mode of goodness, he considers the cultivation of knowledge and his reputation as the highest as an honest man and all important. When absorbed in the mode of passion, one's attachment to family and social position become prominent. And when one is immersed in the mode of ignorance, one simply thinks that the gratification of the senses is the all-in-all of his existence. All such conceptions of piety, impiety, and a mixture of both are products of the mind. Under the influence of the material modes, one sometimes identifies oneself as a demigod, a king, a rich capitalist, a wise scholar, and so on. These bodily conceptions are illusions born from the mental qualities. Whether the materially contaminated mind is absorbed in the mode of as an enjoyer or the mood of a renunciate, in either case, the spirit soul forgets his constitutional existence. Next text. Although he is present with me in this body, the super soul is not entangled, because he exists eternally beyond the darkness of ignorance, thus does not identify with the material body and mind. As my well-wishing friend, he simply witnesses my activities, remaining neutral. On the other hand, I, the minute spirit soul, identify the mind, which is like a mirror reflecting external reality, as my very self. In this way, I'm engaged in attempting to enjoy the objects of the senses under the dictation of the three modes of material nature. This is like, this is Krishna speaking actually, and it's like very explanations of things that are in the Bhagavad Gita in seed form. Commentary. Does this mean that the mind suffers the material existence and not the soul? The answer is no. There are two souls within the body. One is the super soul, who is untouched by the mind's influence, and the other is the infinitesimal spirit soul, who is under the influence of the materially absorbed mind. Although the super soul is present within the body as the controller of the mind, he is unaffected by its functions because he is fully transcendental knowledge and the master of unlimited spiritual energies. He is independent, and he is the best friend of the spirit soul. His knowledge never deteriorates as he observes everything as a witness. On the other hand, the spirit soul accepts a subtle body of mind, intelligence, and false ego as the self, becomes conditioned by the mind and its relevant actions, and remains entangled in the bodily concept of life while trying to enjoy the objects of the senses. Due to the illusions created by the mind, the spirit soul suffers while remaining in material existence. Purport by Bhaktivinoda. If a conditioned soul comes to understand that dependence on the mind simply produces misery, he is informed that service to the Lord is his constitutional position. The desire for material enjoyment or for renunciation of material activities gradually diminishes. To act in our relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead is certainly constitutional duty of the spirit soul. When the spirit soul gives up his constitutional engagement and becomes conditioned by the external energy of the Lord, he remains engrossed in contemplating the so-called happiness of temporary sense gratification, not realizing its insignificance. When one advances on the path of cultivation of spiritual knowledge, lending submissive oral reception to the transcendental sound vibration, he can understand the purport of this verse beginning with the word Suparna. It is only after accepting the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the object of one's of the five senses, five types of rati, that one can distance himself from the influence of the three modes of material nature by controlling the turbulent mind. Sri Gaura Sundar instructed that the service of the Supreme Transcendental Personality, Sri Krishna, as described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, is the fifth dimension of human existence, to be cultivated after finishing all aspiration for attaining perfection in Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. The subtle body is dissolved at the time of perfection and is technically known as Samadhi, Vastu Samadhi. At the time one becomes situated on the platform of pure Krishna consciousness under the direction of the pure devotee of the Lord, thus enabling him to develop a particular loving relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Next verse. Giving in charity, performing prescribed duties, observance of regulative principles, hearing of the scriptures, pious works, and purifying views all have their final aim in subduing the mind. Indeed, concentration of the mind on the Supreme is the goal of yoga. Commentary. To make spiritual advancement, it is essential to control the mind, which creates many obstacles if allowed to roam freely. Activities such as giving charity are performed with the aim of controlling the mind. Indeed, the ultimate fruit of sadhana is to regulate the mind. To control the mind is the goal of all types of yoga practice. Purport. Pious activities such as giving charity, fulfilling one's occupational duties, controlling the mind, controlling the senses, studying the Vedas, observing religious vows, and so on, are aimed at purifying and controlling the mind. Controlling the mind by meditation is essential because when the mind is undisturbed, one can gradually realize the temporary nature of even pious activities so that one becomes determined to act on the transcendental platform. Because karma yoga, hatha yoga, jnana yoga, and raja yoga are materialistically conceived, they do not award one factual understanding of the absolute truth. They can lead one to wanting that. If one's mind is perfectly controlled, next verse, what is the need? This is a very nice one, and I think we found it a few times. If one's mind is perfectly controlled, what is the need of performing ritualistic activities and pious works, such as giving and charity? And if one's mind remains uncontrolled, being merged in ignorance, then what use are these activities for him? Commentary. Learned transcendentalists give utmost importance to controlling the mind. If the mind is controlled, what is the use of engaging in various processes that are meant to control it? And if in spite of performing many religious activities, the mind is still not controlled, what is the use of performing all these activities? Another purport. In this connection, one consider this verse from the Narada Pancharatra. If one is worshipping the Lord Hari, what is the use of performing extraneous penances? And if one is not worshipping Lord Hari, no such penances will save one. If one understands that Lord Hari is all-pervading, within and without, what is the use of performing penances? And if one is not able to understand that Hari is all-pervading, all his penances are useless. Very nice, huh? the purport of all of it is, chant the holy name, surrender to Krishna. That's the conclusion. Fools need philosophy, so we need a lot of this. Next verse. The demigods who control the senses of the conditioned souls are also under the control of the mind. But the mind is not controlled by anyone because it is stronger than the strongest. Indeed, the mind is the cause of fear for even mystic yogis. Therefore, anyone who can control his mind becomes a master of the senses. Commentary by Vishwanath. One may inquire, besides controlling the mind, is there a need for separate endeavor to control the senses? In this verse, the answer is given that there is no need for a separate endeavor to control the senses, because one who has conquered the mind finds that his senses are automatically under control. The demigods who control the senses of the conditioned souls are therefore under the control of the mind. Even great yogis are afraid of the formidable mind, which is stronger than the strongest and heavier than the heaviest. Therefore, anyone who has learned to control the mind is certainly to be considered a great hero. It is stated in the Vedas, everyone has come under the influence of the mind, which is extremely difficult to control. The mind is like a formidable master who is the heaviest of all. Purport by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. The materially contaminated mind is generally eager to enjoy sense gratification, although it sometimes adopts the path of dry renunciation. In order to transcend the influence of material enjoyment and dry renunciation, one must learn to engage the mind at the lotus feet of Lord, Supreme Lord. If the mind is controlled, then all the senses are automatically controlled. The mind collects the impressions of the external world through the medium of the senses. Thus it is essentially perception that constantly disturb the mind. So we have a nice verse by Rupa Goswami that Lord Chaitanya likes so much. That if we want to chant, we think one tongue is not sufficient, and we think that 2 ears are not sufficient to hear the holy name enough. And when the holy name enters into the heart, the mind becomes stunned and the senses become inert. That means externally, and then no one knows how much nectar is in the holy name. So we're very fortunate Lord Chaitanya has given us this kirtan process. It absorbs the mind. Just keep chanting. And find some service to Krishna where we have to think about it. Take a little difficult service, so we have to concentrate the mind, and we have to really think about it and do things really nicely. Then the mind is connected to Krishna. There's no difference between the service and Krishna. Text next. There are many people who fail to conquer this irrepressible mind, enemy, whose urges are intolerable and who torments the heart. As a result, many people are completely bewildered and create various quarrels, useless quarrels with others, concluding that other people are either their friends, enemies, or parties indifferent to them. Commentary. The word Ari means the heart. Instead of controlling the mind, which gives pain to the heart and senses, a foolish person creates enmity with others, being impelled by the uncontrolled mind. Being on the bodily conception of life, He treats some people favorable, some as unfavorable, and others as neutral. The mind's business is accepting and rejecting, attachment and hatred, as well as friendship and enmity, are conceptions existing within the materially conditioned mind. Next verse. Persons who identify with the material body, which is a product of the mind, possess bewildered intelligence, thinking in terms of I and mine. Because of their illusion of this is I, and this is my relative, this is an outsider, they wander in endless darkness. Commentary by Vishwanath. This verse describes how one becomes entangled in illusion. According to the dictation of the mind, one must accept a material body, thinking it to be the self, and thus one considers everything related to the body as mine. This is how the conditioned souls wander within the formidable existence. Purport. Those who maintain a vision of duality, thinking the material body to be I, and everything in relation to the body to be mine, certainly continue to wander in the kingdom of material existence. Differences in behavior arise due to discrimination. Those who remain in the bodily concept of life become offenders at the lotus feet of the holy name, and thus invite aversion to the service of the Lord. So we have this modern age of iPhones, selfies, my room, everything is mine. iPhone, iPad, this, that. And now the selfies. If a camera was really a selfie expert, the Bhagavatam is the real selfie expert. Because if we hear the Bhagavatam, we will see the self, the real self, in all its glory, the servant of Krishna, as a transcendental, unlimited spiritual being. Next. If you argue that miscreants are the cause of my suffering, and then what about the eternal soul? Happiness and distress are the results of the contact of the senses with their objects, and do not affect the eternal soul. If someone bites his tongue, who can he blame for the pain? That's an interesting one. Commentary. It should be clearly understood that the mind is the cause of one's happiness and distress. Although the bodily pleasures and pain are felt by the soul, one must tolerate such duality, understanding it to be a creation of one's material mind. The gross and subtle bodies, which are transformation of material elements, are the field of activities for the soul, who is distinct from their coverings. If one accidentally bites his tongue or lip, he cannot become angry and pull out his teeth. Similarly, all living beings are individual parts and parcels of God, and this non-different from each other. All of them are meant to serve the Supreme Lord in spiritual equality. If the living beings give up their master's service and instead quarrel among themselves, they will be forced to suffer by the laws of nature. Probably we've all bitten our tongue at one time or another in our life. Purport. Just as it is not proper to pull out one's teeth if he happens to bite his tongue, one should not retaliate against an offense committed by another, because every living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Whole, therefore not different from one another. The servant spirit soul and the master super soul are always meant to live in perfect harmony. If the spirit exhibits opposition to his master and well-wisher, or creates conflict among his fellow souls, then he is acting against his own self-interest. It is ignorance for one to say, I have become happy or distressed because of the activities of another person. The spirit soul is not actually subject to temporary happiness and distress. Happiness and distress are the result of the interaction of the external objects of the world. Because all living entities are servants of the Supreme Lord, if they somehow oppose one another, this indicates that they have become indifferent to the Lord's service, and this aversion to the performance of their respective duties will progressively become more and more prominent. Exalted devotees of the Lord are self-realized souls who know that all living entities are servants of the Supreme Lord. Servants have no other duty than service to their master. By giving up the master's service, one becomes entangled either in love or quarrel, and the result, one will have to experience either happiness or distress. The living entities' relationship with each other should be based on friendship in relationship with the Super Soul. Next verse. If you say that the demigods who control the bodily senses cause suffering, still such suffering cannot apply to the spirit soul. Acting and being acted upon are merely interactions of the senses and their presiding deities. When one limb of the body attacks another limb, with whom can the person residing in that body be angry? For commentary. Even if the demigods are considered to be responsible for one's happiness and distress, what has that got to do with the spirit soul? Actually, the demigods play a major role in human beings' happiness and distress. If the hand of a person points to the face of another and curses, "May you suffer from white leprosy," then the demigod Indra and Agni, who are predominating deities of the face, become insulted. However, this has nothing to do with the spirit soul. This example is given here of the body. If one slaps the face of another person, then it amounts to slapping the demigod Indra, because he is the controlling deity of the face. Wow. So be careful. Purport. Material distress is actually a superfluous condition of the living entities. Even if the demigods are accepted as the cause of distress, there is no distress felt by the self-realized souls. Self-realized souls who are devoid of mundane conceptions of life do not invite inauspiciousness by creating rivalry with others. Rather, they are kind friends to all living beings, irrespective of how others treat them. If one limb of the body accidentally harms another limb of the proprietor of the body, it does not take revenge against the offending limb. Similarly, the Supreme Lord does not take sides in a quarrel between two of his energies. He mercifully gives them the right to serve him while remaining their well-wishing friend. I don't know, I know I used to hammer, pounding nails, and every once in a while you hit your thumb, and the hammer is coming down, it hits really hard, and it hurts. But we just think, oh, okay, I'll be more careful. But you can't imagine how we would react if someone else held our hand down and hit the thumb with a hammer. They would want to kill that person and have them arrested for, a violent attack. So this is what's been saying. Sometimes we're walking and we kick our own ankle or something. So we can't get mad at our other foot and cut it off. We just tolerate, okay, it's life, Next verse. If the spirit soul is considered the cause of happiness and distress, then there's no reason to become angry with others, because happiness and distress would be the nature of the soul. According to this theory, nothing exists besides the spirit soul. If one it must be considered illusion. Therefore, what would be the cause for anger against others? Commentary. A dead body does not feel pleasure or pain. So it must be concluded that our happiness and distress are due to our consciousness, which is the nature of the soul. It is not, however, the original function of the soul to enjoy material happiness and suffer material distress. These are produced by the ignorant conception of bodily identification, which is the action of the false ego. Our involvement in sense gratification drags out consciousness into the material body, where it must experience the inevitable bodily pains and pleasures. Purport. If the soul is imagined to be the cause of happiness and distress, then one should consider such happiness and distress to be his nature, and therefore should not blame others. The person who gives pain and the person who suffers it are actually part and parcel of the Supreme Person. Therefore, any conflict that arises between people on the mundane platform should be considered as superficial and due to the absence of self-realization. Enjoyment of the objects of the senses is not the true nature of the spirit soul, but exists only in contact with matter. Knowing this very well, one should not foolishly try to maximize his material happiness while simultaneously attempting to minimize his material distress. After all, happiness and distress are concomitant factors in material existence. The characteristics of the spirit soul only manifest in the spiritual world. In the transcendental abode of the Lord, there is no material distress, even in the case of separation from the Lord. The insignificant happiness we experience in this world, which is actually an absence of distress, has no existence in the spiritual world. It should be understood that the pure spirit soul is naturally inclined toward the service of the Supreme Lord, because that is his constitutional position. Very interesting understanding of the soul. So I'm going to stop soon. Just checking 37 minutes already, and then I'll finish up this section later. If we suppose that the planets, this is interesting also because everybody's fascinated by astrology and all these kind of things, but if we suppose that the planets are the cause of happiness and distress, then where is the relationship with the eternal spirit soul? The planets can only cause happiness and distress for that which has taken birth. Expert astrologers have explained that the planets only cause distress to one another. Therefore, because the spirit soul is distinct from the material body and the planets, against who should we vent his anger? Commentary by Vishwanath. Even as if it is accepted that the stars and planets are the cause of happiness and distress, this has nothing to do with the unborn spirit soul. The body is possessed by the soul, not that the soul is part of the body. According to expert astrologers, the position of the stars, planets, and constellations at the time of birth influence a person's nature. Thus, it is the material body that suffers miseries caused by the planets, and not the soul, which is separate from the body. Purport by Bhaktivinoda. Astrologers say that the happiness and distress of the living entities is caused by the planets. In the spiritual realm, there is no occurrence of material distress. Therefore, the influence of the planets does not apply to the eternal spirit soul, but only to the temporary material body. Self-realized souls never become exultant or morose on account of the pleasant or unpleasant predictions of the astrologers. Planetary influences are limited to the material body and mind. There is no difference between the soul of a planet and the soul of any other living being. Both are eternal, minute spirit souls, part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. It is only the embodiment that causes one to make a distinction between the two. Next, if we assume that karma is the cause of happiness and distress, we still are not considering the eternal soul. Karma, or fruit of activities, take place when there is a conscious spirit soul in the material body that undergoes a transformation of happiness and distress as a reaction to work. Because the body has no life, it cannot be the actual recipient of happiness and distress, nor can the soul, who is ultimately aloof from the material body, because karma has no ultimate basis in either the body or the soul, at whom can one become angry? Commentary. If we accept karma as a cause of happiness and distress, we must consider how fruitive activities are performed by the bodies of the conditioned souls and not the souls themselves. The body is dull matter, whereas the soul is pure consciousness. The spirit soul has a no factual relationship with the material body, just as light has no connection with darkness. Considering this, at whom should one become angry? And purport by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. If the cause of happiness and stress is attributed to the activities of the living entities, there is still no cause for anger, because fruitive activities are performed under the impulse of the three modes of nature. The owner of the body is the spirit soul, and the body itself is nothing but dead matter. Therefore, the conditioned soul's absorption in the body is due to ignorance and cannot be considered as factual. So we're living in the Kali Yuga where absorption in the body is so prominent that decorating the body, dressing the body, they go so far to decorate the body, even surgery, trying to change the shape of this or that, change the skin, change the hair, grow back the hair. So all for just being absorbed and not even in the body, but the imitation body. So many shops with imitation fingernails and artificial this and that. So we have a big job to do to convince ourselves and then to convince others. But Krishna gives knowledge as soon as someone chants or contacts a pure devotee by reading Srila Prabhupada's books, that they can, Krishna will give knowledge to elevate someone, beyond this. If time is accepted to be the cause of happiness and distress, then that experience cannot apply to the spirit soul, because the spirit soul is an expansion of the Lord's spiritual potency, and time is also a manifestation of the spiritual energy of the Supreme Lord. Certainly a fire does not burn its own flames, nor does cold harm snow. The spirit soul is transcendental and beyond the experience of material happiness and distress. Therefore, at whom can one become angry? Commentary. If time is accepted as a cause of happiness and stress, this still cannot affect the eternal spirit soul. Spirit soul is part and parcel of the Supreme Brahman, just as much time is a representative of the Supreme Brahman. The example of fire and its flames is appropriate in this regard. Flames cannot be burnt by fire, and snow cannot be harmed by cold. Considering this, at whom should one get angry? Purport: snow cannot suffer suffer on account of the fire, those feelings of distress due to ignorance. When the soul is transcendentally situated in his relationship with the Supreme Lord, there's no question of happiness or distress. Next, the false ego, which manifests the visible material creation, is subjected to happiness and distress. The soul, however, who is transcendental to matter, can never be actually affected by material happiness and distress. I decided to finish this section, it's only 2 more pages. In any place, under any circumstance, or by any agency or any person, when one realizes this fact, he will no longer have any fear from any material condition. Commentary. A Brahmana has countered various philosophies regarding the happiness and distress experienced by the conditioned souls. Here he counters any other possible explanation. Due to false ego, the conditioned soul identifies with his gross and subtle bodies, and thus dreams that he is suffering or enjoying that which has no real relationship with the self. Who then is the cause of one's suffering? It is simply due to the illusion that one suffers in material existence. False ego, which is one of the constituents of the subtle body, of which the mind is a leader, is the real cause of happiness and distress, and nothing else. The word yata means certainly. The word samsriti refers to the bondage of material existence. Normally, one who is awake is not afraid of ghosts. In the same way, one who is awake to self-realization has nothing more to fear from material existence. By nature, the soul is pure, and so time or karma cannot be the actual cause of its distress. It is because of illusion that the misconception of accepting the material body of the self and the eternal soul feels temporary manifestations of happiness and distress. This is all the action of the false ego, which is born of ignorance. This is some substance of this chapter, purport by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. The conditioned soul imagines the existence of happiness and distress as a result of his aversion to the Lord's service. However, when he wakes up from his sleep, he understands that the dream of happiness and distress does not belong to him. Under the influence of false ego, the living entities become absorbed in the material existence, and as a result forget their real master. Therefore, there is no need to be afraid of the awkward situation that arise from being absorbed in the bodily platform. The feelings of happiness, distress, and fear that are products of the material nature cannot overwhelm the self-realized soul, who are situated firmly on the devotional service of the Lord. The next verse is the end of the Avanti Brahmana's talk, and this is verse that Prabhupada gave all the sannyasis to chant this regularly. But it's for everyone. Etam samastaya paratmanistam adyasitam purvatamayar mahadvi aham turisyami durantaparam tamo mukundangri nishevayaivat. I shall cross over the insurmountable ocean of nescience by being firmly fixed in the service of the lotus feet of Krishna. This was approved by the previous acharyas, who were fixed in firm devotion to the Lord Parama Atma, the Supreme Personality. Commentary. Vishwanath. Did the Brahmana suddenly remember the pure devotion for the Lord that he had possessed in a previous life, but was obstructed by some reason. It is for this reason that he has now developed independence. The Brahmana appears to exude great confidence, saying, I shall advance to self-realization, knowing that the soul is distinct from the material body, being a part and parcel of the supersoul. This is no doubt that I will cross beyond the ocean of ignorance by being firmly fixed in devotional service to the Supreme Lord. One might question, will the Brahman depend only on the Supreme Lord and no other else? The answer is that he will cross over the ocean of ignorance by serving the lotus feet of Krishna, as approved by the Mahajans. When one gives up seeing things as terms of material body, duality, due to cultivating an understanding of this feeling, one can realize himself as the eternal servant of the Supreme Lord in order to cross over the formless ocean of birth and death. The Avanti Brahman became determined to fight So that's the end of the talks of the Brahman. Krishna says that he took sannyas, he realized. It's an interesting story that he was not a devotional person before. He was a miserly Brahmin, he had a lot of money, but he didn't spend anything, even on himself. His family and servants, everybody finally rejected him. And then he was completely down and out, and then he had all these realizations. And then it says here in the commentary towards the end that it's from a past life that he learned all this but somehow didn't apply it. Anyway, this is a very good study of, because we do have a tendency to blame others for our problems. Think I'm a good person, somebody else is making trouble. Here is a very, very clear and nice explanation. So whoever's out there, thank you. If there's devotees out there from Isa, Rasala, if somebody would call me and let me know about the Harinam today, and I would be willing to come. That's from Bali, of course. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama.